Let me ask you a question. When you think of how you can start to run faster, what comes to your mind? Typically for me, I think maybe I should add some more miles, maybe I should run those miles a little bit faster, and why not spend $300 on a pair of running shoes, because we can buy speed, so why not? Yes, all those things are important, and yes, they will work if you run more miles, and if you run them a little bit faster, you will eventually be able to run faster. It makes sense, right? However, what if I told you there was something else we could do to unlock that little bit of extra speed we've been all craving without adding in any more miles or running those miles any faster? And yeah, that does sound a little bit too good to be true, I understand, but I promise there's some science to back this up, and this is something that I actually did myself, but I didn't realize it until I reflected back on it, and now I'm thinking like, wow, that thing does have some science to it. And I'm talking about brain training. I totally understand. It sounds kind of out there, but I promise there's actually something to it. Let me tell you a personal story of how this actually did apply to me. And you're probably gonna think, how does this apply to running performance, Brendon? Are you wasting our time? Just bear with me, it all relates back to running performance. For those of you that don't know, I was not always a runner. I was actually morbidly obese for majority of my life. And what this caused was a lot of me getting picked on, a lot of being made fun of, me not being able to go out there and do the sports that I wanted to do, and it just completely destroyed my self-esteem. So what I did, and what a lot of people do in that situation, is I'd go inside, lock myself in my mom's basement, and play video games for hours and hours upon end. Because no one could make fun of me for my appearance online. Sure, they can make fun of how bad I was, how big of a noob I was, but my appearance, that was off limits. But eventually what that did is completely destroy my self-esteem even further. It prevented me from going to school very often. I'd skip school a lot to play video games. I would not put time into my homework. I would not do anything to try and better myself, so it was just a continual downward spiral into a mentality of, I can't do anything, and this is about as much as I'm going to achieve, so let's just sit there, play video games. When anything challenging would come my way, I'd just throw it out because, well, I'm stupid and I can't do anything except play League of Legends and World of Warcraft. And of course, like I said, my grades, they deteriorated, and that mentality of me thinking I'm not very intelligent just continued all through high school. But then grade 12 came around and I needed to apply to university, and by that time I was kind of toying with the idea of becoming an engineer. But unfortunately for me, most universities, they will not accept someone with a C- average or worse. So a lot of schools, they flat out just said no. My mom, that poor lady, has so much patience, and she would constantly try to convince me that I was more intelligent than I was, but unfortunately, I just didn't believe it. However, she spoke to the guidance counselor and convinced the guidance counselor that I could actually perform well in university. So somehow that guidance counselor convinced the university to let me into engineering school on a very conditional basis. I had to maintain a certain GPA and all that jazz, which I actually did for the first couple of years. But that mentality of me thinking I'm not good enough, not intelligent enough, continued through my first 2 years of university. I just kept getting more and more obese, and life just was a downward spiral, if I'm being completely honest. But then something changed. I ended up getting an internship at a company in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I decided, why not? Let's go out there, move there for 5 months and do this internship. And that actually ended up being a fundamental shift in my entire life. My entire approach to life, my entire mentality has fundamentally shifted the day that I moved to Ottawa and met a few key people. The team lead at the company that I went to work for was training for an Ironman triathlon, and me being morbidly obese, I did not have any idea of what a triathlon was, and it sounded like an absolutely terrible time. However, the guy was extremely inspirational and actually is now one of my good friends. However, at the time, he was someone that I really looked up to and ended up getting me into running and fitness stuff. We ended up spending a lot of time together, and his positive influence was just a rain shower watering the young flower that was Brendon into believing that he could do something more than what he was putting in. What I ended up doing is committing to going to the gym every day and doing things that were actually beneficial to my life. And the thing about that is, the more that you put in and you see some progress, the more that you begin to think, hey, maybe I am not so terrible. Maybe I am a little bit more intelligent than I put myself out to be. Maybe I can achieve more physically than I think I can, just because I started putting in the work and having a different outlook on life. And through that entire time, I ended up doing some positive self-talk, saying to myself, hey, Brendon, you can go out there and go on the elliptical for 20 minutes. You can go out for a walk. You can achieve things. You're doing this work at this big engineering company, so clearly you're not completely unintelligent. And that type of mental shift ended up having a major impact on my life. And it took a lot of time convincing myself that those positive things were true, but eventually it just became second nature, and those thoughts of self-doubt, well, I'm not gonna lie, I still struggle with that pretty much every day, but they became easier to manage. They weren't so crippling. One of the biggest things that whole experience taught me was Nothing is impossible if you put in the right amount of work and you fully commit to something. You are able to figure anything out, you can solve any problem, you can achieve pretty much anything as long as you fully devote yourself and have the mentality that it isn't impossible. And that type of thinking has allowed me to achieve things that I thought were completely impossible. Just a couple years after that initial day at that internship, I completed my first Ironman 70.3. Since then, I've completed a couple more Ironman 70.3s. I've done a bunch of triathlons. So training the brain to think that nothing is impossible has fundamentally shifted my life. And this kind of leads on to the rest of the video where maybe you don't have a bunch of weight to lose. Maybe you just want to run your 5K a little bit faster. The same type of tricking your brain to think that you can achieve something is actually applicable to those situations as well. So I recently read a book called Endure by Alex Hutchinson. And the whole premise of that book is that we never reach our physical limits because our brain, this thing right in here, is keeping us from reaching that full potential. They call it the central governor, which kind of pulls you back when you're about to push over your limits, but you're still not at your limit, but the brain is trying to make sure that you're never reaching failure or in any real harm. It's limiting your muscle output, it's limiting all those things in your body so that you don't push over the edge and end up killing yourself. And that is pretty great. I'm glad that I have him on my side to make sure that I don't go too hard. However, what we need to take from that is that we aren't actually at our limits when we think we're at our limits. For example, at the end of a race, I typically speed up and sprint to the finish. But how would I be able to speed up and sprint to the finish if I actually could deplete my entire energy reserves? That wouldn't be possible. It just wouldn't be. Of course, if you're in any real harm, you're feeling chest pain, you're feeling dizzy, woozy, all that stuff, just stop. It's not worth it. Just stop, sit on the side of the road, take a little bit of your ego out of the equation and just sit back. For me, for example, I go out there and run 5 miles or so and I'm like, oh man, I'm pretty done. Meanwhile, I've ran for 7 hours straight, so I know that I'm not done after 5 miles. And unfortunately, I don't have any sound advice how you can go out there and train your brain. It's all personal. You have to figure out how you can train your brain your own self. What I found worked for me is positive self-talk and going out there and doing things that my brain says I can't do, going out there and doing them and realizing, hey, this brain thing, it's really, really stupid, you know? It's really stupid. I can achieve that. I can go out there and run for 7 hours straight. Who says that I can't? This thing? Watch me, just watch me. And proving my brain wrong over and over and over has fundamentally shifted the way that I view everything. At work, for example, if a problem's challenging, I can fix that, I can solve that. If I'm feeling fatigued out there on a run, that's okay, I can keep pushing a little bit. Having the knowledge that you have a little bit more in the tank than what you give yourself credit for, that is powerful. We just need to learn to train our brain to be able to unlock that potential. And don't get me wrong, of course, you can't just believe you can run a 2-hour marathon and go out there and run a 2-hour marathon. That's not how it works. You still need to put in the physical training, get that physical stimulus, and be able to build your body to be able to have that aerobic capacity, have the muscular endurance to go out there and achieve those running goals. But once you have that muscular endurance and you have the aerobic engine, if you don't have that self-belief that you can achieve that, you're not going to achieve that. It's as simple as that. And this video's gone on long enough. I'll do a follow-up video if you're interested in it, but I just want to know, have you ever had some experience like this where the brain has been your limiting factor? I'd love to hear your experiences down in the comment section down below, or do you think this is just a bunch of BS and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense? I want to know that as well. Leave a comment in the comment section down below, and if you made it to the end of the video, I'd really appreciate if you could hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you on the next one.